Hi, I'm glad you're here. Today I want to talk about gap analysis and how it relates to organizational change. Um, Early practitioners, among the early practitioners, Richard Beckart was considered to be one of the most important to organizational change, and he associated with Lippitt, Lewin, and Bradford at the National Training Lab and working with social action groups. Warren Bennis, in his latest book in 2010, I went through a webinar with him, and he told the story of how they discovered social action groups. And he said that Lewin had a practice of, after training, he would take all the instructors and facilitators into a room, and they would debrief, talking through the process and what type of results were achieved by the process. And one day while they were doing this, some participants from that day walked by the room, and they could hear that they were all in there talking about the process of what they just went through. So they asked Lewin if they could come in and participate in the discussion. Of course, Lewin was always open to something new, and Lewin invited them in, and that's where they kind of learned the value of debriefing process with the participants. Beckart said his first consulting job was in 1951, and he considered this to be a transition from being a trainer to becoming a consultant. He was also the very first to use the words facilitating change to describe his work as a consultant. He was also a professor at MIT. Um, In the book, The Planning of Change, Beckart gave credit to his change work to Lippitt, Watson, and Wesley, although I think most people probably still considered Beckart the source of this. And this is where they first described his changes involving three states. It's what he called the present state or current state. Then there was the future state, or some call it desired state. And then Beckart's words, there was the getting from here to there state, and that's the transition state. Now, for doing this model, most people, they start with the future state. What is it that you actually want? And so this desired state can be described either through informally or through a formal systematic process. And then once that's done, then you would kind of parallel that structure to identify, well, how is it now? What's the present state? And then once they've done that, the real work is on identifying, all right, how do we move from the present state to the future state? Just as an example, where once I did a whole intervention just with this model, and I was in manufacturing, and I was working with die setters, and at the time they moved dies for urethane bumpers, molding. This was urethane molding dies, and these dies were huge. They weighed tons, and when we started, it basically took an entire shift to change a die, and it took a crew of die setters to make that change. So the organization ideally wanted to get it down under an hour. So what I would do, I would work with the die setters, and we would kind of describe what would be ideal future state, and then we'd actually use video and videotape die changes for the present state, and then the die setters would work with those videos, and they would come up with ideas for the transition state, and these guys were great at what they did. When it was all said and done, not only were they under an hour, they were down under 15-20 minutes to change dies, and they were benchmarks for the world in large die changes. And all of that was done off this pretty simple model. This is the model. This is what it looks like, the present state, usually represented in the lower left, and then upper right so that you're moving up to the future state or desired state. And then the transition state was this part right here in the middle. And that was all the things, all the steps that need to happen. And this would take some time to move from here to here. And, I kind of talked about this. The transition state is actually, the work between desired state and present state actually determines the gap. That's where the word gap comes from on a gap analysis. And then that work that's done in the transition state, the purpose of that is to close the gap. And so this becomes a gap analysis model, which is the foundation for organizational change. I used Beckhart's book Agent of Change as kind of his memoirs, life memoirs. And the classic book on the model itself is Beckhart and Harris, Organizational Transitions. And then the Bennis book I talked about is called Still Surprised, a memoir of a life in leadership. And you might say, at the time I went through the webinar with Bennis, he was 86, and he was still healthy and sharp in doing the webinar. The only thing he said he was doing different due to his age was he'd reduced his travel. He said he didn't fly long distances to do consulting work. Now, I think he lived somewhere in California, so he was limiting his work to the West Coast. It'd be great to be that age and be that competent at that age. So this is gap analysis. I'll post a transcript of this as well. Thank you.